Bonjour, welcome, bonjour, and thank you everybody for joining us today on really what is just a beautiful sunny day for this session of the UBC Dean's Community Engagement Series. And my name is Jan Hare, and I'm really pleased to serve as the Dean of Education here in the faculty. And I'm also a proud UBC alumni, having graduated from the Department of Educational Studies. I do want to acknowledge that I'm a guest on these lands, being an Anishinaabe from the Chaging First Nation. So I would like to acknowledge that UBC Vancouver is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam people, and that UBC Okanagan is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan Nation. And these lands have always been a place of learning for Indigenous people who for millennia have passed on their cultures, histories, and traditions from one generation to the next on these lands. And I would also like to recognize that you are also joining us today from many places near and far and acknowledge the traditional owners, our caretakers of those lands. And so to learn more about the land in which you reside, I recommend visiting native-land.ca. And I believe Shruti will be posting that in the chat. Okay. So this series is now in its fifth season, which means this is my fifth year as dean in the faculty, but this is our fifth season. And this is a series that's designed to showcase research and practice and to engage in discussion around important priorities that are impacting educators today. The sessions also explore how we as community can support and empower young people to face the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. And so I really appreciate how these sessions bring together leading scholars in our Faculty of Education, like Dr. Lee Gunderson, who will be presenting this evening, together with educators, experts, administrators, community, and sometimes even the voices of students in schools. So I really appreciate how this series is able to bring us all together. Today's session features the ESL Assessment Consortium, and this has been established by members of the British Columbia Lower Mainland School Boards. The consortium's purpose is to consider various issues related to the assessment of students who come from homes where the language spoken is not English. And I want to say that this work is important. It's important to us as educators, given the increasing diversity in our classrooms and our communities, including English learners with varying proficiency levels, which considers different assessment approaches. And so we know that assessment is an ongoing part of educational practices, and that English language learners face unique circumstances within the practice and expectation of assessment, whether that is cultural bias, testing anxiety, testing of language rather than content knowledge, or insufficient or needed training and creating alternative assessments. So I'm really glad to be hosting the work of the consortium this evening, and I think there's something for all of us to learn from here. And so I'm going to now invite my colleague, Dr. Lynn Tomlinson, to begin the session. Miigwech, thank you.
Mhm. Thank you, Dr. Hare, and welcome to all our guests today. It's just so lovely to see you all. My name is Lynn Tomlinson, and I'm Assistant Dean Innovation and Strategic Initiatives here in the Faculty of Education, and also a proud alum. Spent almost 30 years in the K-12 system and worked closely with many ESL folks. And I'm just so pleased that we're going to have this conversation today. I'm honored to be with you all and extend a warm welcome to everyone joining us. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded, so sometimes people don't want their name showing on a recording, and if you look into the chat instructions, you can see how to change your camera and display name if this suits you. Many people are involved in these sessions and lots of resources are included. And so we know that that's very valuable to you. And we will share some additional resources in the chat to help ensure that the session is warm and welcoming for all of you in attendance. In particular, we need to remind everyone that UBC we have a respectful environment statement and resources pertaining to UBC equity and inclusion. And just want to make sure you're all aware of that. So after our speakers have presented today, there will be a question and answer period. During registration, we did receive people's questions and we've curated those, and we have a collection that we'll bring forward to our panel. Some really excellent questions, so thank you so much to those of you who took the time to include those. Then we'll open up the chat during the question and answer, and we have folks working with us who can look at those questions and will pass them along to me so that I can put them forward to the panel. Shrudi's got some notes for you now. So it's my honor to present our speakers this evening, and we will post a link in the chat so that you can see the full biographies for all of our team today. So we'll start with Kaz Davidson. Kaz is an experienced educator and leader in English language learning with over 30 years of service in education. Her career spans roles as a secondary English, ELL, and drama teacher, and she currently serves as the District ELL Coordinator for School District 43 in Coquitlam. Dr. Lee Gunderson is a professor in the Department of Language and Literacy Education at the Faculty of Education. He teaches undergrad and graduate courses in second language reading and language acquisition, literacy acquisition, and teacher education. He has served as a preschool teacher, a primary level elementary teacher, a reading specialist in Spanish-English bilingual elementary school, a teacher of primary gifted students, a primary learning disabilities teacher, a principal and a vice principal in 2 Cantonese English bilingual schools. At UBC, Lee has served as head of the Language and Literacy Department and the Department of Education and Counseling, Psychology, and Special Education. Janis Sawatzky is the District ELL Coordinator with Langley School District's Instructional Services, with experience teaching K to 11 in a range of roles. She's also taught in UBC's Faculty of Education as a technology integration mentor, supporting faculty in embedding educational technology within teacher education programs, which is an absolutely growing field, Janis. And Stewart Hunter has over 30 years of experience working as a classroom teacher and English language learners specialist with both elementary and secondary students. In her current role as District ELL Resource Teacher for the Vancouver School District, Anne supports teacher colleagues in developing and advancing their professional practice working with English language learners from K to 12. Katerina Vakakis is the program consultant for English language learners and learning and is the learning lead for staff development in the Burnaby School District, where she facilitates district-wide work in equitable, research-informed ELL programming. She supports in-service educators in strengthening inclusive, linguistically and culturally responsive practices, and has contributed to teacher preparation as an adjunct professor in UBC's Faculty of Education. Maria Yioldassis is the District ELL Coordinator in West Vancouver Schools, where she leads the development of English language learning guidelines, policies, and pedagogy. With more than 30 years of teaching experience, Maria brings extensive expertise in language acquisition, literacy, and assessment, supported by graduate studies at the University of British Columbia, where she is a proud alum. And we don't have a picture for him, but he's right there on your screen. Last but not least, our Dr. De Silva. Reg De Silva is a founding member of this consortium, starting as a PhD student and moving on to many key leadership positions in the Department of Language and Literacy Education in the Faculty of Education. Reg is currently Associate Dean, Equity, and has been a strong voice for equity, diversity, inclusion, and decolonization in the faculty as a member of the leadership team. So thank you all, and we will now move on to our presentation with this wonderful consortium of folks. And whenever you're ready to share the screen.
Thank you kindly for that lovely, lovely welcome. We are so excited to join you here today, and what a beautiful afternoon it is. Might we just introduce ourselves again? We are representatives of the ESL Assessment Consortium, and we'll begin with names and faces so you can actually recognize us.
Lee Gunderson, UBC.
Janis, did you want to go ahead? Thank you.
If Dr. Reginald De Silva is available, but I'm Janis Sawatzky representing the Langley School District.
Hi, and I'm Ann Stewart Hunter. I'm with Vancouver School District as ELL District Resource Teacher.
Hi everyone, I'm Katerina Vakakis, the Program Consultant for English Language Learners in Burnaby.
I'm ST43's ELL Coordinator, Kaz Davidson.
Hello, everyone. I am Maria Yioldassis, District ELL Coordinator for West Vancouver Schools.
All right, so welcome everyone. I think it's my turn to start. So
It
first
is.
of all, welcome everyone. Before we begin, we would like to model what we do as teachers when we are working with students. So as teachers, we know how important it is to explicitly explain what the purpose of our learning is for the day. So when we explicitly go over objectives, students are more likely to engage in the lesson and to be more focused and also invested in their learning. So as you can see on our screen, we have two types of objectives that we're going to walk you through today. So one is content and one is language. So let's start with content. So our content objectives really are what describe what learners will understand or be able to do by the end of a lesson. And in our case, they highlight the key ideas and outcomes we hope you take away from today's session. So for today, our hope is that you will walk away and be able to understand the work of the ESL Assessment Consortium, define assessment, gain awareness about the importance of assessment for multilingual learners, and understand the stages of the English Language Acquisition Continuum, otherwise known as the BC Ministry of ELL Standards. As teachers and as learners ourselves, we tend to think naturally about the content when we're teaching or engaging with it. But just as important, and especially when working with multilingual learners, is the language required to meaningfully participate in the learning. So at this point, I'm going to just pass it on to Maria, who's going to talk a little bit about language objectives.
Thanks, Anne. Great explanation. Anne and I often, when we start with our objectives, we like to bring it to reality. And often what we say, we relate these objectives as if, we're going on a vacation, right? When we go on a vacation, we actually map out what we're doing. We think about what museums are we going to see? What restaurants are we going to see? So equally important, that's what Anne talked about, the content objectives. That is so important. When we talk about the language objectives, it's if we are navigating our vacation, we need to think about how are we going to navigate going from point A to point B, to museum, to restaurants. So I think when we actually bring it to that level with teachers, they understand the importance of bringing the learning to the surface, making it explicit and intentional. So when we look at the language objectives, it's really the how. How are students going to navigate the content, just like we would navigate our vacation, right? So by looking at the language objectives, we're actually looking at key words. And if we look at our objectives today, the language objectives, we are highlighting two things, that the oral piece where we're asking questions and discussing ideas. So specifically today, participants will be able to ask questions, which we hope you will, and discuss ideas about the following concepts: summative and formative assessment, BC ELL ministry standards, ELL ecosystem of support, lower mainland ESL reading assessments, primary oral language assessment, and Bix and Kelp.
Thank you, Mayor and Anne. So who are our students? Who are the multilinguals within BC? British Columbia school districts support a highly diverse student population, representing more than 160 languages. Many students speak more than one language and are therefore referred to as multilingual learners. These students may have refugee backgrounds, be landed immigrants, permanent residents, international students holding study permits, or Canadian citizens. Regardless of backgrounds or status, educators are responsible for providing appropriate instructional scaffolding to support all learners. Multilingual learners are supported as they engage with the BC school curriculum while developing proficiency in English and/or French. Being multilingual is not a deficit. Having a strong foundation in your home language is an advantage. It's a benefit. These students are so unique. We value the home language and uniqueness of multilinguals. We encourage students to use their home languages in school. And to best plan for a multilingual student, teachers conduct an English proficiency assessment of the following domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. While planning for student learning, classroom teachers are mindful of the notions that multilingual learners bring valuable assets to the classroom and school. They exhibit linguistic, cognitive, cultural, and social strengths. They have academic potential. They are resilient and adaptive. And as teachers of multilinguals, we aspire to empower them. And our ELL assessment is the first step. So we're actually going to ask you to engage in the chat right now. What words come to mind when you think of the word assessment? What assumptions do we have? Assumptions do we think of or bring with us when we hear the word assessment? My colleague Janis will be monitoring the chat and will share with me some of your thoughts.
I'm reading here some great responses. So, for example, that assessment measures learning. Some people think of it as in it's a grade, it's a check-in, maybe stressful. Another person added that it's the strengths their students are coming in with. So it's a great way to test what those might be, that it might be a scale. I love Melanie Wong, formative and summative, which we will be covering.
Nice.
Testing, leveling, scoring, profiling. There is that risk as well. It's a dialogue between teachers, students, and parents. The next
Beautiful.
steps in learning, holistic, learning about our learners. I'm seeing some great responses about how it can really inform our teaching. And I really appreciate Dean Jan Hare shared that there could be cultural bias when we think about assessment.
Yes.
Yes, I see that again, some possible judgment with the information, sometimes a misfit. Oh, a really good response from Ashley Johnson, measuring teaching strategies. Are we effective with what we're doing?
Wonderful. Okay, well, I hope that we actually answer many of the wonders you've shared there, and we align with some of your thoughts as we share today. We are very mindful when we assess our multilinguals that the process is gentle. We are mindful that we are gathering and interpreting information from them, and the process is ongoing. We gather and interpret evidence about how our students use English to make meaning, participate, and learn across the curriculum. And my colleague Katerina will add to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaz. Yeah, there's so many contributions already to the chat. But let's take a look at what ELL assessment means specifically for ELL. And it actually takes on distinct meanings depending on whether we're using a school lens or a learner lens. So as Kaz mentioned, an initial ELL assessment for schools is key. in identifying the type of supports newcomer ELL students may qualify for. An initial assessment helps to determine a starting ELL level and allows school administrators and counselors to make program planning decisions and to decide the amount and frequency of ELL service. Initial assessments are also the very first contact that ELL students and families have with their school team, and that will be supporting the student. And depending on the student's unique needs, that's also the first assessment that might pull together supports from a range of services, including settlement or multicultural workers, or possibly some learning support specialists. Finally, an initial assessment informs the creation of what we call an AIP, which is an annual instruction plan. And this is shared with all the students' teachers, and it outlines specific language goals and targeted strategies to support a student's ongoing language growth. Now, from the student's perspective, transparent and clear assessment is really key in building confidence in student agency. With a good initial assessment that is shared with students, English learners know what their starting point is in English, and that their starting point is based on language criteria. They understand that they will advance through levels as they gain more conversational and academic English skills. And through ongoing formative assessment, students can monitor their own progress and stay motivated and be agents of their own learning. Ultimately, the shared goal of assessment is to support ELL students to progress along the language learning continuum so they can participate in the provincial curriculum with support, with confidence, and with more independence as their language develops. So, as Maria and Anne described, assessing language takes place across 3 language domains: reading, writing, and oral language. And this slide gives you a snapshot of what ongoing assessment might look like for ELL students. So at the primary school level, formative assessment might be students labeling or naming common everyday items in the student's immediate environment. It could be picture matching or participation in choral speaking tasks, and this would reveal a student's oral language comprehension for these little ones in primary. In intermediate, students may be asked to use graphic organizers and chunking of text into smaller, more manageable parts to show their comprehension of English readings, or they could be observed in classroom discussions to assess their fluency using content vocabulary that the teacher has asked them to try. And at the secondary level, English learners may complete the Lower Mainland English Reading Assessment, which is the LOMERA that was designed by our ESL Consortium. And they would do this at regular term intervals. And this would indicate a student's progress in reading comprehension over time. High school English learners may also be assessed in their ability to complete paragraph frames or particular writing genres connected to their different content areas. And this would give teachers a good idea as to their progress in academic writing in English. So it's really through these targeted, well-planned, and intentional language assessments that ELL teachers are continuously monitoring English learners' progress, giving them feedback for growth, and aligning those assessments with the provincial ELL standards to make sure that teachers are consistent in how we communicate language progress, and that we're growth-oriented in how we set new language goals for language development of our students.
Okay, I've been tasked with giving a very brief history of the ESL Assessment Consortium. So I'm going to begin in 1989 when I worked with Catherine Eddy of the Vancouver School Board's Oak Ridge Reception and Orientation Center to prepare an assessment battery for use at the center that was just built under her direction. I also assisted later in the 90s, early aughts, Catherine Humphreys of the Burnaby School District to develop and norm the Burnaby English Reading Assessment. And then following that, Tony Kerrigan of the Richmond School District to develop and norm the Burnaby English Reading Assessment. In 2008, Dr. Sylvia Helmer of the Vancouver District and I were involved in lots of discussions about ESL and assessment. During these discussions, Dr. Helmer emphasized the importance of investigating the types of assessment procedures used across school districts. She believed it was crucial to discover how districts determined ESL students' instructional levels, as this information directly supported the provision of appropriate instruction tailored to students' needs and ability. Well, to pursue this goal, I invited the superintendents of the Lower Mainland school districts to a meeting to discuss issues related to assessment. Interestingly, none of the superintendents showed up. However, they did send representatives. We met at the Scow Education Center in Burnaby for our first meeting. To me, the results were pretty amazing. They agreed that appropriate instruction should be based on reliable and valid assessment results. They reported that ESL students, including new immigrants from kindergarten to grade 12, were administered some kind of English assessment, although 3 school districts did not administer assessments to primary level students. Assessments varied by grade level and from a single assessment to a battery of assessments. It was reported that scores were used to determine ESL instructional levels ranging from 3 to 8. No conversion protocols were reported. Instead, ESL levels were determined based on examiners' experience with ESL students and assessments. We were told that the old-timers really knew what those numbers meant. Well, they said that over 40 different measures were used to identify ESL students, including a wide variety of locally developed measures. There were, as you might guess, a lot of identified problems. Students whose family moved from one district to another most often had to be reassessed using the new district's measure and procedures. It was not clear that the interpretation of test scores validly and reliably identified instructional levels. Members argued for assessments that were uniform across school districts, provided information about students' comprehension, predicted instructional levels, were easy to administer and score, were valid and reliable, and could be administered to groups of students. Since no such assessment was available, members decided to invent their own. They also decided initially to focus on a secondary level assessment. So they collected passages from secondary level academic texts. They measured the grade level of passages, created assessments containing 8 passages each. The first assessment was administered to approximately 25 ESL students and non-ESL students in 9 districts. That is not only an awesome task, it's a very difficult and complex task. The Lower Mainland English Reading Assessment, LOMARA, was born. Since 2008, the consortium members have created and normed a much more complex and difficult task: primary, intermediate, and secondary level assessments. In addition, they have created and normed a primary oral level assessment, affectionately called a POLA. These assessments are available to the members of the consortium on its website. And Janis, I think you're next.
I am. Thank you, Dr. Gunderson. I have the lovely task of adding on to what Dr. Gunderson shared about how our consortium was created and some of the pieces that we've created thus far. So as you heard, in 2008 to 2009, those members came together, and what's fascinating is they started with over 800 reading passages before they came to a consensus to select the reading passages to create the Lower Mainland Reading Assessment. So you can just imagine the level of work that this group together actually accomplished in 2010. Then after that, we created the Lower Mainland Assessment for Intermediate in 2011, then Primary in 2012, and then an additional one for Primary in 2016 so that we would have some additional options. Then in 2021, there was the creation of the Oral Language Proficiency Assessment, also known as the POLA in some school districts. And what I really want to tie this back to with what Dr. Gunderson has shared is these not being commercial means that we can also tie these in with our curriculum. So for example, the most recent one in 2023 is directly linked to our BC ELL standards so that each question is tied to an actual standard that we are hoping to see a student successfully answer. The other piece I wanted to add on to is that there are some guiding fundamental principles that ensure the integrity and confidentiality of this assessment work. As we heard that the participating school districts, we collaborate together in developing these tools, but we also actively engage in piloting and norming these assessments. So with that, each district's data actually remains very strictly confidential. Districts are only ever given access to their own data, and the results are never shown amongst our members or other school districts. Dr. Lee Gunderson himself personally receives and manages all these submissions. He analyzes the data for us. He maintains an entirely separate database for each school district, and he's never disclosed this data to anyone else. So we greatly appreciate that work that he is doing as part of this consortium. After those findings are generated, they are then derived from an aggregate database that combines data from all participating districts. However, that combined data set is also tightly controlled. It is never distributed, as we stated, or shared with any outside party, and it is not utilized for research purposes at the University of British Columbia. Apologies, I'm in a school. Sorry, I'm just going to finish with one last piece. The last piece I wanted to add is that although we are very grateful to be meeting many times at UBC, the UBC researchers have never used this combined database for individual or institutional research, thus maintaining the trust and privacy established with our school district partners. And we as members and representatives of our local school districts greatly appreciate that we can bring and use these assessments with our students. We are very appreciative.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Janis. So we've now heard from both Lee and Janis about the importance of all the work we do as a consortium. But as you can see on your screen, we have a very important document that drives how we support our multilingual learners. And let me just say, all of us that are on the panel know this document very well, because this policy guidelines, if you could click for me, Kaz, this very important document actually in 2009 they consolidated all the documents into one and then updated it again in 2018. So what this policy guideline does is provide the clear guidelines for how school districts in BC deliver their ELL services. And why it matters is because it ensures consistency, quality, and equity while still allowing for that flexibility across districts. So when you think about the policy and the assessments we have to do, this allows us to navigate what we need to do. And then, Anne, if you could.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Maria. So this document, this is a document that not only gives us an overview of what the ELL services can look like, but also outlines some very specific provincial goals. And the first is to ensure that we have a shared understanding of the expectations for ELL services. So our provincial shared expectations are to ensure that services support student success, inclusion in our schools and society, academic and social language development, and honor cultural diversity, cultural identities, and Indigenous perspectives. It also, another goal is also that it uses consistent provincial language. So it establishes common definitions so districts and schools can communicate clearly and understand shared terms across our province. And to give you an example, if we say adaptations, we use that term quite frequently when we're supporting our students as one of the supports or ways to support. We all understand what adaptations means. It's clearly defined in this particular document. That's just one example. Another goal is that it sets parameters for service delivery. So it outlines the types of language supports we can provide, and it recognizes different contexts for the different districts, but it also defines the roles of the ministry, boards, schools, and teachers in supporting ELL students. Another goal is it supports equitable access. So it provides guidelines for identifying students who require English language support and ensuring they receive it. And another goal is it also allows for district level flexibility. So it recognizes that districts differ and provides room to meet local student needs. And we know that each student is unique and that each school and school district has its own unique needs as well. So what this means is that the service can vary within and across school districts.
Yeah, so just thanks, Anne. That's great. Just to summarize it, the reason this document is so important is because what it does is it clearly lays out in fair, consistent, clear language so that school districts know how to best support their ELL population. So that there's two important things. There's student success and inclusion at school and makes them feel happy and wanted and part of the school and the greater community. Thanks, Anne.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. This is another very important document that we use across our province. It's also developed through the ministry as well, alongside teachers and professionals who've been a part of that process. So what it is it provides guidelines that describe the typical language skills K-12 English language learners demonstrate at different stages of language acquisition. It is based on research, and it is basically a set of can-do descriptors from K-12 used to assess language proficiency and guide instruction for students learning English. It's organized into matrices for reading, writing, and oral language, and these standards track progress across 5 different stages of development of language acquisition, starting from beginning, going right to highly proficient, which is bridging. So why does it matter? The document creates a common language for describing English proficiency across BC, which means that we're all using this document. I like to say or refer to it as an anchor for determining the levels that our students are at or stage that they're at in terms of their language acquisition. It supports consistency and clarity in assessment and instruction. And it also strengthens communication with students, families, and educators. It's wonderful to be able to share the matrices with the students so they can see where they're at, see what they can do at that stage, and with the families and educators as well. And it also encourages collaboration among teachers supporting multilingual learners. So it definitely is a document that we use frequently and across our province. And I pass it on to you, Maria, to talk a little bit about how they're used.
It's interesting, Anne, as you were talking about this, I'm thinking about some of the people that are actually on our session today. A lot of us did a lot of work when these were launched again. We came together, shout out to Dr. Margaret Early and Dr. Spilatopoulos, who came together with us where we looked at the standards with our school districts. So going into how they're used, the ELL teacher uses them for placement and programming decisions, right? They have detailed descriptions of the language proficiency across 5 levels or stages. And they're broken down into the language domains of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. They're also used for determining the amount and nature of a support. And that is very key. We want to it becomes very clear based on their stage how often they'll be seen. Will the support be in class or will it be a small group or pull out? Another way we use our standards is to set goals. So the ELL standards use what we call can-do statements at each of the stages. So the ELL teachers uses the standards to look at what is next, what's coming up in our continuum, to continually guide and create those anchor pieces that they need to move towards. Another thing that teachers often use our standards for is they use them for explicit language instruction. And that is so important because, as we know, our ELL standards are on a continuum. And at each stage, the ELL teacher knows what the student can actually do. So therefore, they're working hopefully in conjunction with the classroom teacher, or if it's a small group pullout, to let the classroom teacher know where the student is at, what they can do, and then create lessons so that they can actually access the curriculum, right? In the end, we all know that explicit teaching and scaffolds benefit not only the ELLs, but all students. For the standards are also important for anchors on how we monitor and report student progress to parents. They are used to report on student performance and ensure compliance with provincial policies regarding the English language learners. And we want to bring it together by pointing out a key distinction between the BC performance standards and the ELL standards. So the BC performance standards are curriculum expectations. They describe the levels of achievement in key areas of learning, whereas the ELL standards are a framework to identify, assess, and monitor the language proficiency, K-12 students, so that they can access the provincial curriculum. The ELL standards help educators plan instruction, set goals, place students in appropriate levels or stages, and that the ELLs feel successful in school. All right. So now let's take a deeper dive into the ELL standards, or our 5-level continuum. As you can see on the screen, there are 5 levels or stages. Things to note are that language learning is a complex and gradual process, and often movement across the continuum varies in pace for each ELL student. So sometimes it can include improvement or sometimes even regression, depending on what grade they're going into. And finally, what we really emphasize is that a level or a stage does not equate a year at a particular level. So there's lots of examples where a student may start school and may advance through the stages, more than one stage in a year, and then be at one particular stage or level for a prolonged period of time. So to better understand this, let's look at our stages here. The first one is beginning. And so typically in that beginning stage, students are at the beginning process of learning English. Often they understand little or no English. Stage 2 is developing. They understand varying amounts of that everyday English. They can perhaps read or repeat or follow, use routine phrases or sentences, but often cannot yet use the language to communicate their thoughts and opinions, and often make those grammatical errors. The third stage is, I typically call it expanding, because we often find that's the one place where students may be at for a longer period of time, because students can communicate their ideas, but have perhaps difficulty with grammatical usage or oral or written language, or often omit words, or maybe incorrectly form their phrases or sentences. And most importantly, they need that targeted support with content, language, and vocabulary development. And
Thanks, Maria. The fourth stage is consolidating, sometimes referred to as transitional, and meaning that they're transitioning from those beginning, developing, expanding stages into a more solid, more they're stronger in their language acquisition stage and abilities and skills. Students have little difficulty communicating their ideas in English typically at this stage. But they still require some support, and typically they require support with idiomatic expressions, words with multiple meanings, and abstract academic concepts. The next stage is bridging, and bridging is where the students are approaching grade level proficiency in English, but they may need support still with those nuances of language in specific situations. And we look at idioms or humor, the subtleties in humor, and the content area is unfamiliar to the student can also still be challenging. It is important to note that when we're looking at all of these stages, we're also looking at 4 specific language skill domains. So that's listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And I do want to stress here that although a student sometimes might fit into one overall stage, it's not a typical scenario. Typically, students maybe, or it could be possible that they could be, for example, at a developing stage in terms of their reading or writing, and be at a expanding stage in their oral language. So we do want to look at all those skills separately and to get a better sense of where the student is at. So thank you.
Thanks, Maria, and that was so thorough. But now when we've heard the official descriptors of our ELL levels, we wanted to show you this slide, which is something that's been used at a ELL new family orientation. Sometimes we do this at the beginning of the school year and other times right after term 1. And of course, what else would we pick but a soccer example? Because who doesn't love soccer, especially coming up into 2026? We chose this example because we wanted families to be able to relate to a skills development, because we've all sort of worked hard to learn something new. And we wanted to sort of take away any stigma or anxiety about recent ELL assessment levels that their students had been given. So if you take a look at this image, at the very beginning of the stages is the beginning soccer player, and even the most favorite of our soccer players were once beginners. Beginning is the very first contact with the ball, and you feel clumsy, you don't know where to begin, and you sort of sit on the sidelines and watch better players do it before you try. And this is similar to our beginning ELL students. We're all familiar with the silent period of language learning, and students are listening and taking it all in, but not producing too much language just yet. And then at the developing and expanding levels, we see lots of structured practice and repetition and coaching and more practice. And this is when foundational skills begin to develop, like kicking and passing the ball. So for English learning, those foundational skills would be learning every day vocabulary and expression, and practicing the basic structures of English sentences, and really learning the rules of grammar the same way that you would learn the rules of the game. And right in the middle, you have this stern but friendly looking coach, and he's standing with his students and giving feedback after a play to help students extend their skills. And I think many of us here would agree that it's the teachers and the families who are the coaches that are helping our students to develop their English language, and actually all their language, all their learning. Finally, in the last part of the continuum, the later parts of the continuum, we have the consolidating and bridging stages. And players are no longer just following simple rules. As you can see by this powerful strike that's about to happen, players know the rules of the game, they have their confidence, and they take risks in new situations and play against harder opponents. And this would be like our ELL students taking on new unknown content and the unique language associated with that content in English. Being able to use English like their peers and with their peers to advance learning is what characterizes the most proficient levels of language development. So I hope you've liked this example. Families have loved it. They respond positively to this analogy. It reduces their anxiety and normalizes the experience of learning and developing in language and in any skill. And, the skills development continuum is true of all languages and all skills that we develop. So if you are currently learning a new language, go ahead and try to place yourself somewhere on this continuum. And what is the stage of learning that you might currently be in? For me, I'm a beginning level Arabic language learner, and I've been there for a long time. I won't mention that part, but you might consider where you land on this continuum.
Thank you so much, Katerina. We're going to talk a little bit now about the benefits of our ESL Assessment Consortium, and also the ways that, and also how it benefits our multilingual learners. And so we're going to start, first of all, a big part of our consortium, of course, is that we develop assessment tools, and our assessments align with the BC standards. It ensures that we're giving educators a clear framework for measuring language proficiency and planning instruction. We also use common proficiency tools, so the districts and schools can assess language development more consistently and reduce differences in how progress is measured. So that's very key, having the common proficiency tools and also the alignment with the standards.
Right. Adding to what Anne has said, the ESL Assessment Consortium works hard to create equitable assessments that reduce bias and promote culturally responsive practices. And I want to say, we're on another project and we really do stand by that pillar. Our assessments also provide data that teachers can use to help inform their teaching practices and know what or how the ELL student needs to successfully access and understand the curriculum.
And then another very key benefit is that we are using shared resources. And actually, these resources are locally developed and normed, which is really a highlight for what we do and important for us for the work that we do. It's very hard. Finding locally developed and normed ELL assessment tools are hard to come by, and especially at no cost to our districts. So when teachers are using them in conjunction with other formative and summative assessments, teachers can rely on these tools to develop quality and targeted instruction. And also another key thing for us is that it's an opportunity for us to collaborate as educators and district leads to talk about what are the best practices and to talk about ways to support our students and our teachers in the work that they do in their assessments. This sharing of knowledge is very important because it provides for consistent practices across our districts. And a huge, huge benefit is that we are working under the guidance of Dr. Lee Gunderson. So thank you for that, Lee. And yeah, it's very important. And we do have the opportunity to meet probably about 5 times a year to connect.
Our assessment consortium creates these practical assessment tools developed with, most importantly, ELLs in mind. These assessments are one piece of evidence that provide that quick snapshot of a student's language level or stage. And then finally, and we really have to stand by this, our ESL assessment helps ensure compliance, assisting schools to meet the ministry requirement for ELL identification, reporting, and annual proficiency updates.
Okay, we thank you for your listening, and we ask now if you would be willing or comfortable to share the answer to this question based on this image. If you have learned an additional language, have you ever felt like one of the animals in this image? Which animal is it and why? I'm noticing already in the chat that there are some people who may feel like the hedgehog who's just kind of poking their head out and observing what's going on in the classroom. Especially if they, as I see Catherine wrote, they love to watch and listen for a long time. Yeah, I read rabbit hopping around and trying out different words in different situations, a fish out of water. Maybe you're the rabbit where you're watching proficient speakers, but holding back like Lori shared. Adding to the fish, I see that Vasiliki added that they managed to swim, but sometimes felt like they were sinking. The bear from Jen looking in and trying to understand. Thank you, Patsy, for sharing as well. Yeah, they're very relatable. And often our students, when they can come into the school buildings, they feel quite vulnerable, right? They're new, they're learning. So thank you for sharing those. I also see a bit skittish, but paying close attention. Yeah, everyone, there's that reserved piece that many people feel. So on the next slide, you'll see that our students, when they arrive in our school systems, there's actually a huge ecosystem there to support them. When they first arrive, they're most likely greeted with their families by administrative staff and often even a school administrator to welcome them into the school community. When possible, we love when an ELL teacher can be free to take them on a school tour, ask questions, answer questions, and really help kind of be that first face, that friendly face that a multilingual student can rely on when they come in. Afterwards, you can see that, of course, they have the classroom teacher and they may have access to multicultural or Swiss workers. Those are our settlement workers in schools who help them get integrated in this community. And we really acknowledge that families will help their own children and we want to be connected with them, and then even their peers. So a benefit of ELL teachers is that we can work either one-on-one or in small groups. So we can also help facilitate those relationships with our students within the classroom. And then in the next section, you will quickly realize that the communication between the ELL teacher and the classroom teacher is really important, because as ELL teachers and our language expertise, our assessments can provide us with information that might be overlooked or just not highlighted through traditional classroom assessments, but is very important so that our multilingual students are getting exactly the supports they need at the right time.
Maria, you're muted. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Janis. Now we're going to look at two case studies that bring together many of the points that we've been talking about around the importance of assessing and supporting ELLs. Our first case study is an elementary student. We're going to watch, as you can see, a short video and there's going to be a student named Maria, no, not me, and a teacher. As you watch the video, we want you to pay close attention to the following 2 points. What do you notice about the student's language skills? And does the student need support? So while you're watching this, thinking about those questions, they'll be on the screen. Another thing we want to point out is make sure your volume is at its highest level as well. Okay?
Where are you from?
Honduras, where are you from?
I'm from California. How long have you lived here?
2 years.
Yeah.
And you?
I have lived here for 4 years, almost 4 years. Yeah. You like it here?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you like about it?
People are nice and I have a lot of friends here. I especially like the food in here.
Oh yeah? What kind of food?
Hamburgers and pizza.
Oh, pizza. I like pizza too. What kind of food do you eat in Honduras?
We eat a lot of food, but mostly I like the eggs and the beans and the cheese.
Oh, do you eat that food here too?
Yeah, since my mom makes them.
Oh, what's your favorite food that your mom makes?
Spaghetti.
Oh yeah, I love spaghetti. Do you like to cook? Do you help your mom in the kitchen?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you do when you help her?
I just sometimes she goes to the store with me and buys some of the things that she's gonna do for the food.
Oh, so you help her with the groceries?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Okay, we've been learning about where plants get their energy from. So how are the roots important to a plant?
The roots of a plant takes in the water of the plant. They help the plants grow more if they're from the sun.
Okay, and how are stems important to a plant?
They're important to a plant, so they can get sun, water, and some other things.
Okay, and how do the green leaves of the plant make sugar?
When the water falls into the leaves, when the water falls into the leaves in the lake.
Okay, so we're going to bring us all back. We've shown this video. I know Maria and I have shown this to numerous teachers when we've done our training and working with teachers and supporting English language learners. And I've also shown this to parents when talking about ELL supports. And the question we've asked the audience is, did the student need support? Where were they at in terms of their language acquisition? So after watching this particular video, did your observations change of her, or did your observation or language skills change? From our experience, most people would say yes. They originally thought she was not as strong, or she was very strong actually, and then they felt she wasn't. And so here is why. Let's take a look at the picture. We're looking at an iceberg model. This iceberg model was developed by Dr. Jim Cummins, and it was developed as a metaphor to describe two levels of language proficiency. We're going to begin with looking at the top part of the iceberg, otherwise known as the tip of the iceberg. It's what we can typically see. It's above the water, typically see or hear when we're listening to someone when they're first learning a language. And if we think back to the beginning of that video that we just watched, the first part, we were actually listening to Maria, the student, and she was using everyday language, social language. She was talking about spaghetti that her mom made, types of things she liked to do. Dr. Jim Cummins coins this or refers to this as basic interpersonal communicative skills. It takes about 1 to 2 years to learn that social language, and we have it above the waterline because it represents the conversational or survival English, and it's also very easy to see or hear, right? And typically we can make that error that the person is quite fluent, right? When we're seeing that and hearing that. But below the surface is a whole other area of language development and acquisition. And I know Maria's going to speak to below that surface.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. So let's think back to our sweet Maria that's in the video. We could clearly see that she struggled answering what we call the academic questions, right? She struggled with the bottom of the iceberg. The bottom of the iceberg is, if you look at it as a visual, is very large. It's like 4 times the size almost of what can be seen at the top. And Dr. Jim Cummins calls this bottom of the iceberg cognitive academic language proficiency. And his research has found that it can take anywhere from 5 to 10 years to master that academic language. This is the essential school language that students need to be successful. So this visual is actually brilliant because when we share this with parents, they can actually see if they're thinking of their own child. Oh, this is what I hear my child. They hear the top of the part. But when we show them the visual of the iceberg and they see the actual importance and size of it, then they understand the supports that are provided by our ELL teachers. So at the bottom it says, we can't assume that a student does not need support, and this is where the assessment is key. And we'll move it on to Kat.
Thank you, Maria and Anne. So for our secondary example, next slide. Yes, thank you, Kaz. This is an example of an ELL student at the developing stage of English language learning who is enrolled in Drawing and Painting 10 class. So as you know, many of our beginning and developing multilingual learners, they integrate gradually into mainstream classes and they take electives like art, music, and foods because these are spaces where they can participate fully from the very beginning because of the strong visual and demonstration aspects that are, embedded in these courses. So many people think that there's less of a language load in these elective courses, but that's not always the case, as you will see by reading the assignment that the student is faced with. So we can see that the student is a highly skilled artist. Kaz, go back one level so we can admire the work of the student. He's really proud of his artistic skills, really recognized in his home country for this amazing drawing ability, but he can't get past the demand of that assignment. So in the next slide, what you'll see is a breakdown of the language adaptations that the ELL specialist teacher created for a co-planning, co-teaching session with the mainstream teacher. Each adaptation that you're going to see pop up on the screen, it represents layers of support that the student is going to receive. And all the students in the class, because there were varying ranges of abilities within this class, you're going to see the different layers of support that will help these students. So you'll see that when we pair terminology with visuals, and in some cases, you'll see that we're offering direct translation into the students' first languages. It's not always perfect because Google Translate has a lot of errors. And whenever possible, we would use other students who share the student's first language to do that translation. But as soon as we do that, we immediately eliminate the burden on the students in language. So putting cylinder or shadows with clear imagery, the comprehension becomes immediate, and the student is able to start working on the artistic aspect of the assignment and not be bogged down by the language. So what's really important to emphasize here is that the learning standard did not change for these students. The artistic expectation did not change, and the rigor of the assignment did not change. The only thing that changed was that the language accessibility was made possible for the English learners. So as we understand from Maria and Anne's example of the iceberg model, social English develops relatively quickly, but this academic language, this academic English, the deeper specialized language that's connected to content areas, it takes upwards of 7 years to develop, maybe more, for sure more. So when students are at the beginning and developing stages of English proficiency, if we don't make intentional language adaptations, they're unable to fully participate in learning, even when they absolutely have the cognitive ability and the skills to do the work. So we hope these two case examples help you to appreciate the important connection between assessment for learning, student confidence, and ELL students' equitable access to learning and the importance of that.
Thank you, ladies. Such great examples on where our students are at and how we best support and scaffold for them. And as you can see, we're very, very busy doing that all the time to ensure that there are those access points for students in all classes, not just their academic classes. Thank you. Really, really nicely done, Lynn. So where are we going? What are we doing next? The ESL Assessment Consortium continues to grow. We began as representatives of 12 local Metro Vancouver school districts and the University of British Columbia. We now have members from the Fraser Valley school districts and other districts joining us. Some districts that are not local join us on Zoom when we meet at our monthly meetings. It's exciting, lots of growth. Lots of people that care about these students. We are currently working on the mirrors. These are creations of a quick reading assessment tool for grades 4 to 7. And generally, our common themes remain. We are working towards inclusive practices. We believe in honoring a wide diversity of first cultures and sharing Indigenous ways of learning, and moving our students along the English language acquisition continuum while moving our students towards independence. You're up, Reg.
Thank you, Kaz. Hello, everyone. I'm Reg De Silva. Apologies, I couldn't unmute at the during the introductions. From the MIRA, which Kaz just talked about, I want to go back to Lomera, which is, and talk a little bit about the computer and digital formats with a little bit of history around that. While currently Lomera, which is one of the first tests that was developed by the consortium, Lomera is the Lower Mainland English Reading Assessment. Lomera and other English language assessments from the consortium are administered mostly now in paper form. But early in the development of Lomera, we had explored administering the test in electronic and computer-based formats. And so as part of that effort, around 2010, we created an online version of the test, the Lomera test. The online version mirrored the paper-based format, and We administered it within a controlled and secure environment. And through a very statistically designed experimental study, we compared the paper and the computer-based Lomera test and found that statistically that both formats were yielded comparable results. So that was a way for us to now move in the online environment. Also, as you might have guessed, it was more accessible and easier to administer this test. So I was fortunate to be involved in that pilot that was led by my friend and colleague, Dr. Dennis Murphy-Odo. Shout out to Dr. Murphy-Odo, who's now a full professor at the Busan University in South Korea. But this study was Dr. Murphy-Odo's PhD dissertation, which is just another example of how this consortium has also supported doctoral work in the Faculty of Education. So I'll put in the APA reference to a journal article based on that pilot study that we did in the chat when I finish my slide. But I wanted to say that this pilot was a significant undertaking and again, a very successful university school partnership. So I want to acknowledge the ELL coordinator of Burnaby School District at that time, Kathy Humphreys, all the several teachers and administrators for supporting the study. And as you can imagine, in the implementation of what happens in the implementation of most technologies or digital technologies, there were factors that limited the continued use of computer-based Lomera beyond that pilot. And these challenges included costs to adapt to changing technology, as well as varied school infrastructure for digital technologies at that time. But as I mentioned earlier, while currently the consortium's assessments are paper-based, the group is exploring ways to administer Lomera digitally. And so this study and the explorations that we have done with technology offer the promise that these assessments that we are talking about could be digitally administered to help classroom teachers. So we're excited about that. And so with that quick overview of technology and the consortium assessments, I will hand it over back to Maria and Anne.
Okay, thank you, Reg. So we're nearing the end. Anne and I started off by talking about the importance of bringing the objectives to the forefront. And then my example of planning our vacation. So just like if we were on vacation and we come home, we often reflect on, we think of the great memories, or we say, next time I will. So equally important as a classroom teacher, as an educator, bringing the class together and revisiting the objectives and saying, did we meet our objectives? Yes or no? What are our next steps? This is important to summarize the learning so that the students can reflect on and understand and know what they've done and where they're going next. There we go.
Thanks, Maria.
Take it away, Cass.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for listening, and thank you to my colleagues for sharing alongside us today. We would like to ask you again to engage in the chat and to reflect through engagement. Our wonders are this: in what ways did you connect with the presentation today? And if you can, share one key insight or a new understanding that you've gained based on our presentation. I'll give you some time to process and write those out. I know that we will be answering questions at the end, but if there's anything else that you haven't thought about or we inspired a question, please consider putting that in the chat also, because there will be moments for us to respond to those. So again, in what ways did you connect with the presentation today? Was there one key insight or new understanding that you gained, and any other wonders or questions? And Janis, I'll trust. I was just waiting for you. I'll trust you to share with me. How are we doing there?
I was just waiting for a few more responses, but I'll start with Vasiliki, who shared that they're saying thank you. Much of this information on assessment is relevant to the FSL education, so French speaking language education. sorry you have to go, but thank you for attending this with us. I like that Jen shared about how it's a powerful reminder of how the BC ELL standards align with equitable practices. Marika shared, thank you for this engaging session as well. I'm glad you appreciated the standards and ecosystem breakdown. That's wonderful. I will give a fair share that my administrator actually shared that image of the animals and ecosystem at a staff meeting that we did in Langley, and it was a great centering piece. I love Harini shared that she loved hearing the children's voices through sound and drawing, reminding us that assessment is relational and humanizing. That's wonderful. And that our local assessment aligns with the BC standards from Laurie. And Amber shared she really enjoyed the animal reflection of language. Yes, that's a good one. Way to go, Miss Beth Kearney. Thank you for that great idea to begin with. Veronica shared, I'm a college instructor and I'm teaching international adult learners, and the language proficiency levels 1 to 5 and the iceberg really resonated with me. Yes, I'm also now thinking about how to incorporate images, icons, picture, and to not feel like I have to simplify or decrease the academic rigor. That's wonderful.
That's great.
The video, Amber, about Maria, the student, that one comes from the Center for Applied Linguistics. I do not know if we have permission to share, but we will.
Yeah,
we can reach out to ask. We do.
You can find it on YouTube.
Oh, perfect.
Yes.
So yeah, we can share that with you with our slides and when they get sent to everyone. And thank you, Beth, for sharing. It was great to hear about the story of the ESL Assessment Consortium and the past and future work. Yeah,
Beautiful.
It's great to hear the history. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you. And might we acknowledge you and share gratitude with you in some of the languages of our multilinguals. So I'll begin. Dankeschön.
Chaiga.
Shukran jazilan.
Kopkunka.
Efcharistume.
Thank you, everybody.
And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing your work today. Just a wonderful presentation, and we can see your caring and nurturing and how important this work is, and just so pleased to be able to share your story today. Your leadership is truly an inspiration. Thinking about how powerful it is for district folks to work together and make sure that all learners are supported in a good way, and that just comes through loud and clear. So thank you so much. We know complex classrooms are just such an issue, and your work is just so important. So we don't have a lot of time left for questions. So what I'm going to do is just bring the 2 questions that were put forward in the registration, and I'll leave it to you to decide who would like to respond to those. So the first question is, what are the unique needs of EAL students who have direct refugee experiences or experiences of forced displacement? What special considerations do ELL teachers and other educators need to take into consideration when engaging with this population of students?
I would be happy to answer on behalf of everybody. Sure. And please chime in, Katerina, as we do. Many of our refugee students, of course, come from background experiences that might include trauma. And so in Coquitlam, in School District 43, we do have trauma practices that we share to classroom teachers, in particular of our beginner classroom that includes refugee students. And so there actually is a skilled worker working alongside the classroom teacher in that classroom to support the students with their needs. A simple consideration is that classroom does not have a bell that sounds or a buzzer that is a sound to move classes along that can be a distraction for those students. Simple considerations like that. The classroom has many moments where there are activities that can be done in groups or alone or moved around in sort of centers. So it's small moments of learning rather than all together. I know that's a consideration that's very well received. We also work alongside those families. So I know in particular the refugee students invite their families to small presentations that they do in class and during the day, and they invite them individually. So it's a small group of parents, and they have their own time with the teacher and the Swiss worker and trauma practice support worker, and those seem to be very well received. Are there any other considerations, Katerina, we could add?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that some of our refugee students who are arriving are developing literacy in general. They have interrupted foreign education. They don't have strong reading and writing skills in their own language. And the struggle with the older students is finding resources that are engaging and relevant for them, but written for their level of reading. That's something that we're always looking out for. So we use sort of a picture induction model technique where we show students images of things that they love, like soccer, and we do some vocabulary building and text creation from images that are familiar to students. That's one of the techniques we use regularly. And also helping our secondary teachers to teach reading to to teenage older students, because that's not always a skill that secondary school teachers know how to do. So we're always working with our literacy teams to try to empower both our students and our teachers to work together on that development. I think there's a lot of patience and there's a lot of networking of a team to support these students. And then bridging them if they often can't meet sort of graduation requirements by the time they turn 17, and then making sure our districts have a plan in place where they can continue their education when they have to leave the secondary program.
Might I add, just to support what you shared, Katerina, I also added Storybooks Canada.
Yes.
I know Dr. Bonnie Norton at UBC was part of this along with a couple other individuals, and that it's a great resource as well because it can be used digitally, or teachers can print these texts in both English and a home language and send it home. And it's just a wonderful resource that I've popped into the chat for anyone unfamiliar with it.
Thank you. You have lots of things going on for them. That's just great. Wonderful to hear. The second question, from your perspectives, what role do you see schools, psychologists, and psychoeducational assessments playing in supporting multilingual learners when learning disabilities are a concern, particularly in contexts like French immersion or other multilingual settings where standardized norms are limited or unavailable? And how should this information be used alongside classroom-based and language-focused data?
Well, let me be a little contentious here. I think
I didn't write the question.
I think they should get out of the business of being involved in figuring out someone's disability in terms of language. Typically, when you use a Wechsler IQ test to judge differences in language ability and language performance, it just doesn't work with ESL students. Teachers do better jobs, actually.
Can I just quickly speak to that too? I think quite often our English language learners are either diagnosed, or under. both ways, because sometimes we can jump to the conclusion that a student does need, there's something else going on, like a diverse learning need, when in actual fact, the student just needs that extra time. Thinking back to that iceberg of Bix and Calp, it takes time, right, to develop language skills. So that can be an issue too. And sometimes underdiagnosed, because there's a lot of factors involved in when students are acquiring a language. And so we may make assumptions, or we may feel that and also they need the time, again, to be able to speak and acquire the language in order for any kind of a psych assessment to be credible or to be able to be valid. So I do, and I echo what Lee has just said too, that we don't want to jump to conclusions, but we definitely want to support our students along the way.
Yeah. And I'm just going to say one thing to add to what Anne said is, like, typically, when we always approach thing as, it's a village. It takes a village to support a student. And it's like, it's not just one person or one assessment that makes this decision. It's a group of educators working for our best intention for this child so they can be academically successful and successful in society, right? So it's like us coming together as a group, whether it's the ELL specialist, the classroom teacher, the school psych, the speech and language, we come together so that we are monitoring the progress and we know what's best for the child when it's the best time.
Thanks, Maria. It does take a village. The other questions seem to center around, and I know because we've run out of time, I'm just want to put to you that the questions are around family support. So connecting with the families of these kids, sort of how do you ensure that ESL assessment practices families are engaged in those practices? The soccer image, for example, Katerina, seems like a great way to sort of help people understand what you do. But that seems to be a question when I'm looking at the other things that have come up. And then also the early learners, and thinking about what resources do you recommend and assessment practices for those kindergarten and early primary years, so that the approaches really are capturing both language development and cultural linguistic assets. So those are sort of the other questions that came up, more around early learners and the families. So if you have, we do provide resources after these presentations. If you when you go home and think about some of the resources that you have, if you have any that you could recommend, we can include those when we do our follow-up email for everyone. But thank you so much for sharing just a wonderful, rich discussion. I've just learned so much, and I'm going to pass it on to Dean Hare to finish us up tonight. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn. So, miigwech, I just want to say miigwech. Thank you. And I want to extend my gratitude to the leadership of all of you, all our presenters in your districts, in your classrooms, and in your practice and in your research. You certainly fulfilled your goals for this session. And I think we really have a good and certainly emerging understanding of the purpose and practice of assessment of English language learners that's occurring here in British Columbia. It really strikes me that there's real transformative work happening within this consortium to create more equitable, effective, and certainly learner-centered approaches to English language assessments that really came across. And we certainly need English language assessments that I'm going to say seek to evaluate language in the way it's actually being used, whether it's in context in real time. I believe it was someone said targeted and well planned. And so in order to provide those personalized pathways for growth rather than simply measuring deficits. And this requires an approach that sees assessment of English language learners as really an integrated part of learning, of the learning process through classroom touch points, and saw real evidence of that. What I did hear was that maybe the future of English language learning assessment really isn't about less testing, but maybe assessing better. And so I appreciate the emphasis on a gentle process that includes creating assessment systems that listen and respond to our students, provide actionable insights for growth, and really view language proficiency as dynamic and multifaceted. And so as the research of our colleagues and the research that you're all engaged in really supports these processes and approaches, and I think it's really up to all of us to support this transformation in our schools to ensure that every English language learner experiences assessment in ways that are meaningful, and I believe Melanie said relational, and I would also add empowering. So thank you so much for your the presentation of the work of the consortium this evening. So miigwech.